Can everybody hear me?
Yes.
Let us pray. May the words of my mouth and the meditations of all our hearts be acceptable in your sight, O God, our strength and Redeemer. Amen. Before we begin, a little bit about me. I love the church. Just so you know, I thought, since we're reimagining, I'd start with what I love about the church. And I mean the institutional church, or as some people are now calling it, in missional church groups, the established church. There's the established church and then these new missional churches. And I'm fortunate that I've made my home in the church for as long as I can remember. I grew up in Nova Scotia and I attended First St. John's United Church, and there it was an early morning family service, and we worshipped in the chapel at 9:30, and children crawled around. We sang all contemporary hymns, so it was a bit of a different kind of early church bringing up. And then my family moved on to Edgewood United Church, where I met my wonderful Sunday school teacher, Mary, who taught me about asking questions and living faith. And there I spent my teenage years, and it was the community at the church, along with Mary and many others, who helped me through those very difficult teenage years. And it was also there, at the age of 13, that I first heard God's call to ministry. Needless to say, 13, I did not talk about it with anybody, but it did set me on a path towards serving the church. So reimagining is hard for me to do. I love the church. For those of you who are wondering if I've forgotten about the things that we get wrong in the church, I haven't. I know that I love the church in spite of its flaws. I think you might know what I mean. Maybe it's the argument about what size cup towel should we have in the kitchen. True story. 45 minutes. No, I'm kidding. And it did turn me away from the church. Or the discussions, how are we going to keep our doors open so we can operate? The ongoing lament, and maybe you've heard it too, about the good old days when the pews were full and the Sunday school was busting at the seams. It's a church I've never met or remembered, but we have a deep longing for that time that's gone by. And I love the church in spite of the ways it closes doors to some and welcomes others. And I love the church in spite of the judgments that make it untenable for some people to come. Those are the times when the church is not at its best. But when the church is at its very best, we provide welcome and hospitality and comfort and support and prayer and worship and joy and laughter and community, to name just a few of its qualities. I'd like you to meet my friend Frances. She walked into our church one Sunday morning just after the new year and sat at the pew the very closest to the doors at the back of the church. Her husband Gerard did not want her to come to church. As Frances said, he was afraid because he knew that religion and mental illness didn't go well together. Here's what Frances wrote last year in her faith story during Lent. That New Year's, I made the best New Year's resolution I have ever made. I was going to go to church every Sunday, although I still sit at the seat nearest to the door. A quick escape may be needed. I love the words. I understand them and know how powerful they can be. The words we use are important. I was hearing words I'd never heard before, like love and acceptance. I began to learn about peace and forgiveness. It replaces all I learned about fear and hate. It brought me joy. I was grateful for what I received from the church, and I'm glad to call it my home. That was a year ago. And now Frances sings in the choir, and believe me when I tell you, there are no easy escapes from our choir loft at Cochran Street. This is the church at work, the church at its best. Mirrors what is written in our Song of Faith that says we are called together by Christ as a community of broken but hopeful believers, loving what he loved, living what he taught, striving to be faithful servants of God in our time and in our place. So maybe you are beginning to feel my dilemma. Maybe it's yours too when it comes to reimagining. Why should we? Why would we want to reimagine the church? But I think churches of all the denominations are struggling for so many different reasons. Some just to keep the doors open, some to attract people into their pews. Here's our interactive part. I'm going to ask you to help me out. Can you name some of the challenges facing churches? Maybe your church, maybe other churches? Attendance, yeah, that's hard. How do you get them in? Yeah.
Too much real estate.
Too much real estate, yeah. Yeah.
Trying to find a balance between science and faith.
Science and faith, yeah.
Not enough involvement of youth.
Not enough involvement of youth, yeah. Yeah. Those are all challenges we all face, and I don't think it matters which denominations. I prepared a list in case no one said anything, just in case. I'll skip the ones we already named. Church attendance, that's a hard one for all of us. It's really low. We have large buildings that are empty most of the week. An increasing number of people who fall into a bunch of different categories. Have you heard of the duns? The ones who attended church, they've gone to church, and now they are done with church. They are not walking through our doors again. And then there are the nuns. They have no religious affiliations, and they fall into a bunch of different categories. Maybe they're atheist or agnostic. Maybe, like I was talking with my hairdresser the other day, maybe they're like her friends, and they've just never been to church. Their parents never brought them. They don't know what it's like, and if they had to go into a church, it would be like entering a whole different country because they've never been there. And then there are people who call themselves spiritual but not religious, so they have faith, but they aren't going to walk into an institution to express that faith. The social landscape for churches has changed over the past generation. Church attendance is no longer a social norm. Once you were expected to go, and that's not the case anymore. Church no longer holds the same place in our communities that it did even a generation ago. So if we, the established church, want to continue, we must reimagine ourselves for this time and this place. How do we do it? Where do we start? I think we start the place we've always started. We start with the biblical narrative, which is rich in wisdom. The people Jeremiah was writing to in our reading today had lost everything. Their homes are in ruins. They've been marched by force. It was a terrible, terrible time in the history. They've been marched by force to the land of their enemies. There's a remnant in Jerusalem, Jeremiah the prophet being one of them. And worst of all for the people was they lost their temple in Jerusalem, which was the center of their religious life. You get a sense of the heartbreak in Psalm 137. By the rivers of Babylon, there we sat down and we wept when we remembered Zion. On the willows there we hung up our hearts, for our captors asked for us of songs, and our tormentors asked for mirth, saying, "Sing us one of those songs of Zion." How could we sing the Lord's song in a foreign land? And I think today our churches find ourselves in a bit of a foreign land, and we need to learn how to sing the Lord's song anew. So what does Jeremiah advise to the people held captive in Babylon to do? Jeremiah says, build houses and live in them. Plant gardens and eat what they produce. Take wives and have sons and daughters. Take wives for your sons and give your daughters in marriage, that they may bear sons and daughters. Multiply there and do not decrease, but seek the welfare of the city where I have sent you in exile, and pray to the Lord on its behalf, for in its welfare you will find your welfare. So I think our first step in reimagining ourselves as church and place is to seek the welfare of the people and the place where we find ourselves. Build houses, says Jeremiah. They're here for a long time. It's not going to be a short exile. Build relationships. Build connections with the land and the people. Pray for the place you find yourself. I think Jeremiah's advice, both to the people in Babylon and to us today, is really hard, especially when you are longing for those good old days. Times are different. But before, as a church, we longed for that golden era of expansions. Our churches knew how to seek the welfare of the city. You only need to walk around our city here in St. John's to see the signs of it. Look at the nursing homes and the hospitals and the schools. Who built them? Churches. We did. We did it together. But I think we are out of practice of seeking the welfare of the place that we are living. We've hidden ourselves inside our church buildings. Sarah Cunningham, in her book Portable Faith, tells a story of a middle-aged woman who's behind the desk of a bond office and who says to her, "There's at least a dozen churches within a 4-block radius of here, and that doesn't change anything. The city is the same as it's always been, same problems, same hardships, same cycles. Churches hold weekly services for anyone who wants to come. But I don't think there's any reason to believe they impact people beyond their own buildings." Listen to that last line again. I don't think there's any reason to think they impact people beyond their own buildings. Cunningham continues by writing, she says, "Despite growing up as a pastor's kids and logging hundreds, maybe thousands of hours in church pews, I knew in the sinking deep in the heart of my gut of what's true that coming was not the verb that Jesus used in his parting shot to the disciples. Come, join us was decidedly different from an invitation to go into all the world, and inviting ones, almost the polar opposite of identity as sent ones, the term attached to those first believing apostles who bore the message of Jesus." Now, I'm not suggesting for a minute that we go back to building schools or hospitals or nursing homes, but there are many people in our community who need our help. And we can do so much as a people of faith to make our community a better place, to seek the welfare of the place that we live. I think of the wonderful outreach ministry of your diocese, the Home Again Furniture Bank. It's a wonderful example of seeking the welfare of the city where we live. My own congregation at Cochrane Street has undergone a change, a big reimagining. As a congregation, we were stuck. All our resources went into supporting a building instead of ministry. The city of St. John's was knocking at a door, and not in the way you want the city knocking at your door. They wanted huge and very expensive life safety upgrades to the building, and we simply couldn't afford it. So what were we to do? The congregation took a leap of faith that would see them seek the welfare of the city. They set up a not-for-profit organization called Cochrane Center with a community board of directors that actually owns the building. Cochrane Center now is the home of 15 units of affordable housing, performance space, and community space. And the congregation is just one of many user groups that use Cochrane Center. And we are still reimagining today. How can we serve the community around us? And we're not alone. Churches across Canada are doing different things, reimagining in their own way. One congregation decided that they no longer needed to use their sanctuary in the same way. There were only 8 of them. And they put an indoor playground in their sanctuary and worshiped in the parlor. And now the members of the community come to play, bringing their children to come and play. Some come and play, and some come and ask questions of faith. Some come and play and have their children baptized. Another congregation was having a problem with teenagers using the front steps of their church as a skate for skateboards, I shouldn't say skating. And instead of kicking those teenagers out, they took an underutilized gymnasium and put an indoor skate park. And now those same teenagers not only have a place to skate, but there's always someone there to tell them the stories of Jesus. So as we reimagine, we need to expand our ideas of what it takes to make a church. It could be pub theology or beer and hymns. It could be a community gathered around meals in a home. There are so many ways that we can reimagine our church, and it won't be the same for any 2 congregations. Jeremiah's message is not so different from Paul's message in Corinthians. Because Paul's advice was about love and how we love one another. The early Christian community at Corinth was brand new. And the people that were there were from every possible background. And they didn't really know how to get along with each other. Some valued knowledge and some valued prophecy. And so they were arguing about whose spiritual gifts were the best. And Paul says, strive for the greater gifts, but I will show you a still more excellent way. And I will show you a still more excellent way. And that more excellent way, of course, is the way of love, which bears all things, believes all things, hopes all things, endures all things. At the center of our reimagined church will always be a community grounded in love. As we enter into this time of reimagining in our churches, let us do it with that love that Paul talks about, and let us seek the welfare of the place that we are in. Who knows what God will have in store for us, whatever it holds and whatever it looks like. I know that the church I love will continue to be a place of community, of broken but hopeful believers who gather in Christ's name, sharing a love that knows no bounds. Amen.